Bibles and Bullhorns. I am one of your hosts, Jonathan Morris with Iron Outreach in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. With me, as always, John Neifert with Tulip Gospel Outreach in Pella, Iowa. John, how are we doing this evening?
Doing really, really well. Starting to get dark and having to find time to make things in the light, and yeah, it's that time of year.
I know. I have no natural light here at all, so in case you're wondering why I appear to be broadcasting from the shadows, it's because the sun has abandoned us here in this on this desolate planet. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're excited to be back. Little reminder about our format and our pledge to you, our faithful listeners. We're here to chat evangelism, and each time we meet, we like to bring on an evangelist or someone from the world of evangelism. But our reminder is that we're not here to try to glorify the person we're talking to, or ourselves, of course. We're here to talk about strategies for glorifying God, and who better to glorify, really. Our guest tonight's a very exciting one. This is my pleasure to introduce Marv Plementosh. He is the owner and founder of a tract publishing company called 1 Million Tracts. And you can find them on the web at 1milliontracts.com or yougotOurtract.com. Very excited to introduce Marv to the program. Marv, welcome to Bibles and Bullhorns. Thanks for coming. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Sure thing. Now, Marv, 1 million tracts. I decided to do the math. If you hand out one tract every 15 seconds, it would take you 347.2 consecutive days without resting or going to the bathroom to hand out 1 million tracts. Did you do that at one point in time? Is that where the name comes from?
Most definitely.
Yes, I'm sure.
But not alone.
So. What did you tell us? We're very curious to know not just the name, but the history of the company. How you settled on doing this as part of your life.
Sure. Well, I'll back up a little bit from the tracks. So, I just moved back from Texas, where I was the general manager for a ministry called the Great News Network, which did the evangelism boot camps for Living Waters Way of the Master before they started the Ambassadors Alliance. And I was with them for a year, and I felt the call to go back home. So I came back home, and it just happened to be the year, it was 2006, where the Super Bowl was in Detroit. So we wanted to pass out a bunch of tracts at the Super Bowl. And so we got about 25,000 tracts for the Super Bowl. Living Waters graciously donated to us $10,000 million bills. And then we printed up 15,000 business card size tracts of Super Bowl trivia. And the week before, we had an ice festival in a town called Frankenmuth. And so me and my buddy Bruce, who's my witnessing partner, which you should never go out alone if at all possible. So we'll tip there already. But so we go to this ice festival, and I'm in Michigan, so you can imagine it's an ice festival how cold it is. And so we start passing.
Is that a nice festival or an ice festival?
Ice.
Okay.
I-S-E. Ice sculptures, snow sculptures. And in a town called Frankenmuth, which is a Bavarian town that was actually founded by Lutheran missionaries as an outreach to the Indians. So we'll tidbit trivia there. But so we go there we just want to knock the rust off, because we really haven't been out doing a bunch of evangelism because it's been so cold since like October. So we go there and we set up and we just start passing out tracts in hopes to get a one-to-one, a witness, something. And we're there in 2 hours, and we kept running out of tracts that we had in our bags. So our wives were walking around, so we kept sending them back to the car to grab us some more. So after 2 hours, we found out we already went through $10,000 million bills that were donated to us for the Super Bowl the next week. So now we're down to 15,000 tracts. We couldn't believe we passed out that many in 2 hours between two of us. There was that many people that came through. They just flocked. So I made a couple phone calls, and Ray and another guy so graciously donated another $10,000 million bills, and next day aired them. So you can imagine that cost that they sent them to us for the Super Bowl.
Right.
So we get to the Super Bowl in Detroit, and it was kind of nice that we had giant snowflakes happening that day. If you've ever been in the north, you know what I mean. It was warm, but huge snowflakes. And so we set up and we're passing them out. And the very first person that we talked to goes, I got one of these $1 million bills in Frankenmuth last weekend, and I've been wondering, what must I do to be saved? And I'm like, really? Glad you asked. And there was a guy that had never been out with us, and he goes, is it always like this? And we're like, of course it is. No, it's never like this. This is the first time that's ever happened to us. So we spent the next 2-3 days at the Super Bowl stuff, passing out our stuff, and we had brought in some people from all over the U.S. flew in to do it with us. So it was kind of like a boot camp. I think we had about 15 people. And so a buddy of mine, Michael, came, and he flew back home to Texas. And about 3-4 days after that, he called me up and goes, I got a crazy idea. Let's pass out 1 million tracts in a year. It doesn't seem, other people do great, bigger, giant things. He said, but let's do this at a grassroots level. Let's just see how many of our friends will sign up and pass them out. So I made a little website called 1 Million Tracts, put a little thing on there, sign up, put a little form on there people could put in. We just didn't want tracts that people got that set down. We wanted to keep your count of what you actually put into somebody's hand. And by the end of the year, we had 72 people sign up, and we passed out, I believe it was 1.5 million tracts in 365 days between us. But as we're doing that, I quickly realized I couldn't afford to keep buying the tracts just for myself to pass out. It was too expensive. But I found out from when I printed the ones for the Super Bowl, I could print them a lot cheaper. And so I just started to come up with ideas for tracts, specifically to do this 1 million tracts in a year. And so then I think we had maybe 10 tracts or something like that we did. And then the people that were using were like, hey, can I get more? I want to buy them. I'm like, okay. And then I got challenged by my pastor next year. He says, well, you did 1 million. What are you going to do this year? I'm like, nothing. And he goes, I'm going to challenge you. See if you can double it, to do 2 million. So we said, let's do it again. And that year we passed out 2.5 million. And we had a few more people, but our reach was growing. And then that year I decided, well, if people really want these tracts, we should make a website and start selling them. So that's what we did. We started making tracts, people give us ideas, and we start publishing them. By our third year, we had actually, this is not what we sold, but actually passed out 5 million tracts that year.
Wow.
Between people that signed up, and logged in through our website to count their tracts. So that's how we got the name 1 Million Tracts. It was through me and a buddy of mine just challenging ourselves to do something, and God turned it into a ministry and a tract publishing company.
Wow.
That's amazing. See, and I'm usually happy when
step back a little bit.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
No, I was just going to say, let's step back one step further too, right? I mean, you started that 1 million tracts. What got you interested in evangelism and sharing the gospel, from the very beginning? What's your motivation?
Sure. So I got saved in '89. Somewhere I was out of high school. It's the year I graduated. A buddy of mine, a coworker, invited me to church, and I went to church on a Wednesday night, and he asked me how I liked it on the way back, and I said, yeah, I'm never going back. So Sunday, he asked me to go to church again, and I'm like, yeah, I told you I'm not going back. No thanks. It was boring, didn't care for it. So he asked another coworker if he would go. And my coworker said, well, I'll go if you go. And I'll never forget my thought in my head at the time was, well, he really needs something. He needs God, so I'll go so he'll go. So I show up at church that night because that's when the young adults met. He never showed up. And that's the night I, gave my heart surrender to God. And been going ever since. But during that time, I got involved with drama ministry, music ministry. I play guitar, been in worship bands, and we started a very poorly done street outreach, trying to witness. We had no idea what we were doing, but just trying to do something, for Christ. And somebody handed me Ray's book in the mid '90s, the old Hell's Best Kept Secret, the first one with the purple cover. And I read it, and the only thing I got out of that I remembered was the parachute analogy. And so, didn't get the need for anything else. And so I started in the mid '90s. I became the young adult pastor of the church and started preaching and trying to teach the young adults there. And so then in 2003, my buddy Bruce, who's been my ministry partner and stuff for ever since, I gotta say, we've been friends since '89. He was flipping through TBN, and you've heard the story probably countless times. There's Kirk Cameron's face on TBN, and it was the Hell's Best Kept Secret. He was giving the message, and it sucked him in, and he couldn't get away from the TV. It just, he was enthralled with it. And he called me up after he got through and said, hey, you got to listen to the sermon. So I'm listening to it, and I'm like, man, that sounds familiar. And then they got to the parachute analogy. I'm like, I got that book. So I got the book, I read it, and the whole thing made sense. My eyes were open, to the law, the gospel, the need for evangelism, the urgency. And so, man, we just hit it running. But here's the thing. We knew nothing of gospel tracts. We read the book, you went to the thing, but we really never went to the website. We didn't know about all the great tools you could get. But so we just went out on the street and asked people, hey, what is sin? We'd ask them Bible questions, and they'd look at us, and we videoed it. We figured we'd video it. The camera gave us a little bit of authenticity. And then we hit actually the streets of Chicago, did the same thing. Got all these, we still got the videos. The videos are hilarious. So, muddling our way through it.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, you could see a lot of people were touched, and we're giving them the law and the gospel, and we really saw this worked. And so then we started getting all the other resources from Way of the Master and the tracts, the sermons, and we were just eating this stuff up. And we just hit the streets running ever since then. And that's what got me interested in it. And then Living Waters, Way of the Master was doing a boot camp. And so I signed up to go to the boot camp. Well, they turned me down for the first one. They were already filled by the time I heard about it. But they invited me to the second one in Los Angeles. So I flew out there, and man, it was great. All these like-minded people were on the streets of LA, on the beaches, and just going to town witnessing. And I open air preached for the first time, and that was fun. I'm in Huntington Beach. I stand up on the podium, and I go to open my mouth, and I look out, and there's Ray Comfort staring at me. It was a bit intimidating, but he was super encouraging. I know we were horrible compared to him, and he was so gracious. But so I spent the next 3 days just all over the place doing it, and came back, and it just lit my fire. Now, a lot of people get excited, and they go to a conference, they get lit, on fire, and 2 or 3 weeks they flame out, and the excitement's gone, this is gone. Didn't happen for me. I'm still that way today. I mean, when you grasp hold of the gospel and it gets a hold of you, and you see the need, and there's people dying out there. Now, sure, there are lazy days, but the fire's still burning, and so that's how I got into it. And then I signed up to go to the third boot camp, and they invited me back to be a leader. And then they made me an offer to join. and then it probably took me about 3 months to really figure that out because I had a great job, just built a house, and now moving from Michigan to Texas. It was a big step, and I got great counsel and left and did it for almost a year before I felt the call back. So that's kind of the backstory.
Cool.
Yeah, good.
You know,
Thanks.
what's amazing is what is this, John? Our fifth, is it the fifth time we've recorded a Bibles and Bullhorns
Yeah, I think
podcast?
so.
And
Yeah.
it's never planned, but Ray Comfort and Living Waters comes up, I think, every single time. It just shows you
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
the impact, and that's John and I. That's how we met. We met at an ambassadors academy. He was actually the first person I talked to the day that I got to the one that I went to. Never would have walking up to him. I was just, hey, are you here for the ambassadors academy too? And now here we are doing a podcast together.
Right.
So
A little while later,
I'm
but
in LAX at our first boot camp, the first one I went to, and it was very easy to spot the evangelists. They got the backpack they got, and I just walked up to this guy and I said, "Hey, you want to happen to be here for this boot camp?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I go, "Well, so am I." And I go, his name was Ted Weaver, and we're still friends to this day. And he lives in Ohio. And I go, "Oh man, I'm from Michigan." I go, "Listen, you seem normal." And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "You seem normal." I go, "I don't know what kind of weirdos we're gonna meet down here. Why don't you and I stick together?" So
Yeah.
we did. We stuck through that whole camp together. But not there weren't really any weirdos. But you never know what you're getting into. So
it's true.
it was a fun time.
Yeah.
So I am curious. So in my life, I was handed a few tracts, and obviously tracts are I think big for all three of us. And for you, Marv, actually owning a tract publication company, it's really big. I remember being handed a few tracts over the course of my life. I remember one in particular I was handed, I think it was by someone from Jews for Jesus when I worked in New York City, way back when, like early 2000s. But it wasn't until many, many years later when I kind of like grasped the concept of tracts. I read a book called One Thing You Can't Do in Heaven by Mark Cahill. And that was, yeah, and that was the book that I remember reading it. So a friend had handed it to me. I didn't really know what it was about. And by the time I put the book down, I read most of it in one sitting because I was on an airplane. And by the time I landed, I was like, I think I'm going to have to go order some tracts and start handing these things. I had no idea how big a part of my life they would become. But I knew, like, as soon as I read this book that they were about to become a part of my life. But some Christians have a negative perception of tracts. I've heard Christians, and I think that they mean well. I think, but I've heard Christians, and they're weird. Like I, having handed out so many and having seen so many great reactions to them. My perspective is most of the Christians. I can't speak for unbelievers. That's a separate topic. But most of the Christians who think they're weird, I think, are just the ones who haven't tried handing them out yet. And I think once they try, they see that, first of all, it's not weird. Second of all, it is actually productive. Third of all, it's also a lot of fun. Like some of my favorite memories over the last, let's say, 5 years or so have come just going out and handing out tracts with like friends of mine or family members or whatever. I'm curious, what did you think about tracts early on in your Christian walk? Did you ever have a negative perception of them? Like, was there ever a time when you looked at tracts and said, what are these funny pieces of paper? Really, what did you think of them initially, and how did you get to where you are today, where obviously you believe in them so much you own a tract company?
So that's an interesting question. I can answer it with a couple words. I hated them. Absolutely hated them. I thought they were garbage and trash. And I'm known as a tract guy. That's what's funny to me, and I think back at it. God's got a sense of humor. I remember walking through the mall in the mid '90s here in Flint, Michigan, and some guy ran up to me and put a tract in my hand and took off. It was a dine and dash type thing, and
Mm-hmm. Hit and run.
I tried to yeah, hit and run. I tried to I said, hey, wait a minute. I wanted to tell him I'm a Christian. I don't need this. And, it offended me for some reason. And then my buddy that was with me goes, why does it make you so mad? I go, I don't know. It just does. And I took it and I looked at it and then put it in my pocket. And, later on I just threw it away. But it haunted me for a while. Why was I so upset about it? And it was because somebody assumed I wasn't saved. Well, nobody knows you're saved unless they talk to you, right? And
Yeah.
so it's just kind of funny. I just had that negative aspect about it. And I never even used them until after Hell's Best Kept Secret when I read that or heard it and then read it. And so, yeah, my early on I just didn't really care for them. But I've got some great stories, about them since. They're an amazing tool. I don't know if you got the back of my business card in one of your orders. Have you ever read that? It lists the top. Why should you give out tracts? 10 reasons. They're economical form of evangelism. They work while we sleep. They have the ability to get into a house and stay there. That's weird if you do that.
Yep.
They're never afraid. They don't show cowardice. They don't compromise the message. They never get tired. They stick to what they have to say. They can present the message when you don't have the time. They can go to places where we cannot, and only speak when they're read. I mean, why wouldn't you have something like that? Yes, most definitely talk. Use your mouth, preach the gospel, share it. But you don't always get that opportunity. Fast food restaurants, gas pumps, people you meet, they just don't got the time. So you can slap a tract in their hand and, something like that and say, hey, read this.
Yeah.
I wrote this. Will you read it and check it out? You can contact me on the back. And with all of our tracts, the bottom of it say yougotOurtract.com.
Mm-hmm.
And because we never wanted anybody to go to a website where you buy tracts. We want you to go to a gospel site. I don't want anybody to feel they're a number either. So it's just strictly a gospel message site. It's got the rest of the story, so to speak, on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I really like that, right? A lot of people will ask, well, hey, what do you do for follow-up? Or how do you, right? I mean, you're out sharing the gospel and running into people that you may never see again, right? How do you follow up? And I think this is a really good way to do that, right? Where you don't actually have to follow up, right? Because they may leave town and you never see them again, right? You point them to that website. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it's just not possible. Or you go into a city where, you're not going to be there tomorrow, but they can email you. They can contact us through the site. And every email we get, it's responded to mostly if it's a legit email. And if somebody's looking for a church, somebody talk to, a Bible, something like that, I know enough people around the United States that we usually can get them hooked up somewhere.
Yeah. And I like the focus on the, prayer, reading the Bible, getting connected with the church, all those different aspects of that. So
yeah, and then we encourage people. We put it on them also. If you're really serious about this, pick up the phone. There's a church, a function on there to help you look for a church, and just go. Try it out.
I think there's a little bit of a perception amongst some, again, people who really haven't tried evangelism, that because of the hit and run nature, even when it's not just handing a tract and running off into the distance, but when you actually even stop and talk to somebody, but you may be in a strange city, you're talking about going to the Super Bowl. That's not the town you live in, right? So many of the people you witness to there, you're not in touch with today. But we still need to plant those seeds.
Many people that go to an event like that also aren't from that city either.
Right, exactly. I was trying to think as you're talking about, one of my favorite stories, one of my favorite evangelism stories from the Bible is Philip the evangelist being sent to meet with the Ethiopian eunuch. I'm pretty sure, it's not really clear from the text, but I'm pretty sure he didn't meet that guy 3 times a week for a Bible study for the next 20 years. I think he sat down with him and explained the scriptures to him, right? And then Philip probably went his way and the eunuch probably went his way, So I think that there is a biblical tradition of going out and planting or watering these seeds and then moving on, but equipping the person so that they can live the Christian life after you've moved on to the next guy or the next gal.
Yeah. Most of the episodes of evangelism in the New Testament are what we would call cold calling. You know, it's not friendship evangelism,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no follow up. If you look at it like that, I mean, Jesus was a failure in evangelism. You know, he didn't chase people. He didn't run them down. He didn't say, "Oh, you must believe. Oh, you know, just try it this way or do this or that." He presented the message and left it on them. And that's not to shirk our responsibility, but what are we called to do? We're called to make disciples, right? How do you make a disciple? Well, first you got to evangelize, right? Then they got to come to Christ, and then you can disciple them. You don't disciple an unbeliever. You give them an opportunity to come to Christ, and once they do, then you take them in like a newborn baby and protect them and care for them and move on like that.
Right.
But yeah, you definitely have to have an avenue for follow up, but I don't believe it's mandated.
Yeah.
Not for an unbeliever.
Certainly in this day and age with the internet, it's great if you're going to go out and evangelize, to have a resource that you can give people. I mean, maybe if you stop and give someone a tract and it turns into a 20-minute conversation, and they express a desire to repent and believe on the spot. There's great websites out there that have church finding features on them that you can help that person
Mm-hmm.
find a church. Whether they go or not is another story. I've had situations where I was witnessing in a city that I didn't live in, but I knew a local church, and I checked with them, and that person never showed up. We can't. There's nothing we can really do about that. But I mean, certainly, helping somebody if you get into that longer form conversation to find a good biblical church, and by biblical I mean Bible preaching church, so that they can get to
Sure.
that next
Yeah.
stage of their spiritual development. I think is helpful.
Yeah, and that's why carry a business card. You know, give somebody your email, give them your phone number, or get them from them. Especially if they show that repentance on the street with you, uh,
Yeah.
that you can do that follow up. Because then you kind of got a I don't want to say a command, but you kind of got a burden to do that type of follow up. And I don't see why you wouldn't want to. I mean, I would love to do that. That's why
Right.
we're out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't follow up with everybody, but I can tell you what, through doing this for 20 years, I could follow up with everybody that has had that type of response because you don't get that very much, hardly
Right.
at all.
And we
I
are a body of
frequently,
Christ as well, and there's different
yeah,
people carrying out different roles and different aspects and different phases in the discipleship process too. Yeah.
yeah, and like I've called churches and asked them, hey, talk to this guy. He's really looking for somebody, and for the most part, they're like, yeah, we'll follow up. You know,
Yeah. We
that's
just
what we
Yeah.
handed
do.
it to you. I mean, you handed it.
Yeah,
Why not?
yep,
You dream about those things, right? As a church leader, yeah, someone just, well,
yeah.
like we say, the fish are jumping into the boat.
I've got a really cool track story from my buddy Joe. He was going through a hard time. Him and his wife uh, were split up at the time, and he's a salesman. And he was driving down I-75 in Michigan here, and went to a bar, walked into the bathroom. He'd been drinking, and on the counter was a gospel tract. He never picked it up, never looked at it, but he knew what it was, and it haunted him. It haunted him for 3 days. He couldn't get that image out of his head. So he's working one day, and he's driving some city, just doing a sales call. He sold heavy machinery. Picked a church out at random that he saw, walked in, asked to talk to the pastor, and asked him, what must I do to be saved? I mean, doesn't get any better than that, right? As a
Right.
pastor, and I'm like, man, I wish I could have been fly on the wall that day to watch the pastor's reaction. But it's pretty cool.
Yeah, Marv. Yeah, with the 1 million tracks, and I've been out. I've looked at your site. I've tried to get a little bit of a sense of some of the different tracks that you have. There's a lot in there, kind of similar vein that we talked about right before the recording here. There's a lot of them that are pretty bold, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love addressing, like the contradict, right? The yard signs around, no matter who's president, Jesus is king, right? A lot of those type of things. So what do you think, is important about getting into a tract, or the message and how you present things with in a tract.
Sure. So, kind of my idea, like you talk about bold. We got these that say pride with a rainbow on it.
Yep.
It says what comes after pride. I mean, there's no getting away from what we're addressing right here, because the world knows what the rainbow flag is. But then when you read the back, it says the world defines pride as a feeling of deep pleasure, satisfaction. We go right into the gospel. We go right into, we bypass what they think it is, and go bypass their intellect and try to convict their conscience, because we don't want to argue with them, and that's kind of like what we try to do with our tracts. We make the front of them like eye catchy, that they'd want to read it or something like that, and then we just hit them with their need for, or why they need the gospel. We try to pull out what their sin is. We use the Ten Commandments and different things like that. But like one of ours says, "I sin." It's kind of a play on the Apple thing, but there's no getting around what that says. Yeah, I sin. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we just think a good gospel tract, can't be cheesy looking, and it can't be too wordy, because especially in this day and age, nobody's going to read it. They're not going to take the time. Now, I do have like some wordy ones that I have a lot on there, but I save those for follow-up. If somebody's interested, I go, here's some more information, for you to read. But like these are short, they'll read them. They just work. You give them enough that the rest of it's on the website. And I tell you what, I get emails every day from our website. Most of them are not good. People are not happy, and I get called every name. And I've learned quite a few new words in my life from having this, website. But I love it, because if you get mad, what do you do when you're mad? You replay the scenario. You think about what you could have done different or said, and the whole scenario just plays over. So these people are preaching the gospel to themselves over and over and over in their head. At least that's the way I look at it. And so it's a win. And
I like that.
They email me, and if the email's, it's 50-50 on if it's a valid email. Normally it's like, I am Satan at satans.com. You can tell it that's not real. Or they proclaim that they're Christ, and so you email that, it bounces right back to you. But I just give them the track again. I give them the same message that they already read, and I'm like, thank you for another opportunity to reach you. And if they're really mad, I say, why does this upset you so bad that somebody believes in something so much that they cared enough to share that message with you? You don't have to get mad. You can toss it, ignore it, or move on. But you reacted. Why did you react mad? Because it hit close to home. That's why. So
do you
yeah.
Do you on that note, actually, with people getting mad? So there's funny tracks out there, and there are tracks that maybe take a more somber tone. Do you find that the reaction? Now, personally, I like to use tracks that are maybe a little on the cheekier side. I mean, and what can be cheekier than the $1 million bills, really?
Sure. Yeah.
But like, do you find that? I think it's been said that the funnier, eye catching tracks maybe till the soil. They kind of soften the heart a little bit to hear the gospel. Have you found that to be the case? Like, do your because I've used some of your tracks, and I've browsed your website for others and stuff, and some are on the funnier side and some are on the more serious side. Do you find that the reaction to the funnier stuff gets less negative response than the more serious stuff?
Well, I think I do it like this. I think you have to have a tool for every occasion, right? So you go to a farmer's market and you stand up on a stool and you start preaching fire and brimstone. At a farmer's market that's full of, family, older people, it's not a bar district. It's a different message you need to bring them.
Mm-hmm.
Still the gospel, still that,
Know your audience.
but in a more loving atmosphere. Now, if you're in a bar district, or we would go down to the Indy 500 at, towards the evening, it gets rough, and you can get a crowd, and it gets kind of rowdy, and you can give them more of a bolder, harsher message because it needs it. And I think that's the same with the tracks. You're talking about cheeky tracks. Living Waters used to have this track when I was working doing the boot camps with them. It was called Department of Annoyance. I don't know if you've ever seen it. They haven't had it in years, but it was funny because it looked like a business card, and it looked like you worked for this company called Department of Annoyance. On the back of the card, the whole track was in reverse. You had to read it in a mirror. And so we got challenged to use some of the tracks that we didn't like. Well, I hated that. I hated that track because it was backwards, and how do you use this track? So I go, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I would just find a group of people milling around somewhere. I'd walk up and I'd just start talking to them like they knew me. Like they have no idea who I am. I just join in their conversation. And they're looking at, and I know they're looking at me like, who is this guy? What's going on? And I go, man, you guys don't remember me? And they're like, no. And what's really funny is when somebody goes, oh yeah. But I go, man, I'm from the Department of Annoyance. I'm sure you've been annoyed before, and then they all laugh and chuckle, and you hand it all out, and it's a cheeky track, but you got a track in their hand,
Yeah.
and you disarmed them with humor, and it's just fun. Like it's the same with the $1 Million Bill. You can hand these out, and people, people say it's a bait and a switch. What isn't a bait and a switch? It's not really. It's got a gospel message on the back. You hand it to somebody, they know it's something. But when you go into a conversation with somebody, you start talking about the weather and you turn it to the gospel. Isn't that a bait and switch?
Yeah.
So
Well, and the New Testament, right? Jesus says, come to me, I will make you fishers of men. The fish aren't after the hook; they're after the worm.
It's a worm,
That's a bait and switch too.
Yeah.
Right.
I just look at it like I've been using humor as a defense mechanism since I was about 3 years old. So for me,
same here.
Yeah,
I love
yeah, using the funny stuff is just for me. Like I feel like it's me. Like it would make sense that I would share. And I think this is probably true of Ray Comfort as well. Is he's actually he's hilarious. Most of the guys at Living Waters actually are very funny. It would make sense that we would share the gospel, from our personality, as long as the core message stays the same. Of course, we don't want to stray from what the gospel actually is, but beyond that, I think we're free to share it as who we are. I think.
Sure. Yeah. Humor's great. I've done it all the time. Stupid things. We had problems drawing a crowd, so we started doing stupid humor tricks, stuff like that. The old pull your thumb out like that. The unbreakable
dad
rings,
jokes, right?
Real dad joke type stuff, and you get crowds, people start laughing, and then you go into it. But yeah, I love humor. That's why some of our stuff is like that. I don't have anything on my desk. I brought all the serious stuff, but our naughty or nice card for Christmas, that's cute. People like that. And of course, it doesn't turn. It's just funny, and stuff like that. But we do these to get out of hell free. It looks like the Monopoly card. They're fun. People love them. And then we do, go to football games. This one's for the Patriots. It's a trivia card. It's just fun, right? People want to read the trivia, and then on the back, just says, "Are you ready?"
Yeah. I've used as you know, Marv. I've used your baseball trivia cards.
Mm-hmm.
I used them in probably 4 or 5 games this summer, and they went over really well. I had gotten some hockey ones from you that I plan to use this winter. They're great. They have 4 trivia questions on the front, and then there's a bonus question that says, "What do you and all baseball players have in common?" That the answer to that one's death. But you're just at a baseball game. Like, hey, did you get your baseball trivia? Something to read between innings. People love them. And what's great about those ones too is they're exceedingly pocket size. You don't even have to fold them up to put them in your pocket. They're
right
size
in the pocket.
Yep, it's a laminated business card. Slides right in. You don't even have to fold it, and it's just something they can read at their leisure.
Yeah, that's why we love them. And you go to events, big sporting events, stuff like that, and you'll see somebody passing out chick tracts or moments of the
Mhm.
book tracts or something like that, that they're bigger tracts, and they're everywhere on the ground. And you rarely see some of our business card tracks, even the Living Waters tracks. They just don't get tossed down.
Yeah,
One, they're designed well, and we try to design. I tried to design stuff that uh, people feel guilty to throw away.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, but the pocket size is right. I mean, it's such a simple
Yeah,
thing and it's so important. Yeah.
yeah, and it's a 30-second gospel message. 45, and it's right there, and you can't get away from it. It's enough to make people mad enough to write in a lot.
Yeah.
Marv, is there anyone you can think of that you got a tract to and you walked away saying, I can't believe I managed to get a tract in that person's hands?
Joe
I'll tell
Namath.
you, Joe Namath. Okay, all right,
Yeah.
that's definitely, yeah, that's a good answer. What was the situation where you managed to get a tract into
I was at one of the
Brother
Super
Joe's hands?
Bowls, and it was getting really cold where we're at, so I ducked into in a hotel and standing in a doorway and doing something you're not supposed to do, pass out tracts in the doorway. But Joe Namath comes walking in, and I handed him a track, and he goes, "What's this?" And I go, "It's a Super Bowl trivia." And he literally did this. He pats me on the shoulder, leans in, and goes, "Son, I am Super Bowl trivia." And he laughed, it was good humor. And he goes, "Thanks, I'll check it out later." And he stuck it in his pocket because it's business card size, and
That's
that's probably
fantastic.
one of the coolest ones. But there's been some
Yeah.
celebrities I can't remember. Uh,
Yep. I had
there's
one last December. I was in Cleveland doing some witnessing, and they had this outdoor skating rink, and I found out that the MC was Scott Hamilton, who was a Olympic gold medal winner. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to get to this guy and get him a track. And I figured out where he was, and I got down to it was one of those quick, it was a hit and run, right? Like I didn't stand around and watch him read, every word. But I got it into his hand, and it's kind of cool, like when you get the opportunities to do stuff like that.
he's actually a professing Christian. If you didn't
I
know that.
learned that after the fact, but as we just said, the Christians need to hear the gospel
Yeah,
too,
they need
right?
it too. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
His son is considering the missionary field, so
that's awesome.
they've
Yeah.
got kind of a cool story. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm a baseball nut. I love baseball. I go to a lot of baseball games.
Mhm.
I try to put them in the hands of players all the time, stuff like that. I go to signings that they do and take tracks and give it to them and stuff like that.
Nice.
Uh, just treat them normal, and
I'm gonna have
check
to
this
get
out.
my brother recruited, right? He works at the Denver Ball Arena, and he would have so many opportunities to get tracks into people's hands. He probably can't do it on the job like that, but
Yeah.
yeah.
One of the cool things we did is I used to do NASCAR outreaches at MIS here in Michigan, and so they invited us to come out, and as long as they said we're going to set you up if you pass up the flyer at the gates uh, at different times during the weekend for the different things that are going on, and one of them was a chapel service, so we were preaching chapel services at the campgrounds. And then they needed or people to drive the shuttles for the drivers, golf carts and stuff like that. So I'm like, you're gonna put me in a golf cart and I get to drive these NASCAR drivers, and yeah. So every time we were shuttling them, here's a track, and are you a Christian? We did that probably for 4 or 5 years before I don't know, the management there changed or something. They went some other way, but then they allowed us to stand at the gates and pass out tracks, in between what we are doing. And then we got to do chapel services at the campgrounds. It was pretty awesome. Met a lot of
Yeah.
good Christian drivers too that way. Found out.
Yeah. What's the most memorable conversation you've had?
The screen froze. Most memorable what?
Most memorable, gospel conversation that you've had. You've been out doing a lot of different things.
Oh, I've got a couple. One I wasn't at, but I'll share this one first. You ever drove through Ohio? They have the Ohio Turnpike, and they used to have the toll booths, where that were manned. And somebody kept driving through, giving this toll worker tracts, like a lot. He had a lot of them, and he finally emailed in and said, "Hey, where can I get these tracts at?" And he goes, "Somebody kept giving me these tracts, and I got, they must go through there a lot." And he goes, "I got saved off of reading these tracts." And
Wow.
I don't know who it was, and the guy that gave it to him has no clue. But he goes, "I need to get tracts to pass out." And the guy, this was 12, 15 years ago, and the guy still buys tracts. I was like, if it was doing all this tract publishing just for that, it's well worth it.
Yeah, there's someone who believes in the power of a tract.
Yeah,
Well,
and then there's
they
another
do
one
work.
where, yeah, and then there was another one. I was in Chicago witnessing, and there just happened to be a teachers convention going on by where we're at, and a friend of mine was with me, and his sister, I don't know how this, just God's providence, was at that conference. She come out and had lunch with us, and she's a Christian, and she asked for a couple $1 million bills. She'd been witnessing to a guy, so she took one and gave it to him. And she called us later that week, or called her brother, and he called me. The information on the back of that tract was what convinced him that God was real, and kind of pushed him over the edge. And that very, very memorable. And I talked about the guy at the Super Bowl in Detroit. And another cool one was, I think we're talking about this off camera. We're talking about the Obama $1 million bill. So
right.
I was at the Ann Arbor Arts Festival, which is very liberal in Michigan, and we go down there and we do a lot of open air preaching there because nobody will take a track in Ann Arbor for whatever reason. But passing out this Obama millions, nobody wanted them for some reason anywhere, and so they're really hard. I was trying to get rid of them actually, just go away. I got too many of them. So I hand one to this lady, and she gets about 50 feet. She turns around and she makes a beeline to me. I mean, I'm going to go, great, here it is. I'm going to get an earful. And she thumps at my chest and goes, "How dare you put Obama on something that's got the word of God on the back?" And I go, whoa, that wasn't what I was expecting. So I go, wait a minute. And I go, well, I got other ones. So right. She goes, what? She goes, "I just don't like him." And she said something. And so I gave her a different one. She goes, "Thank you." And she went off her way. Next day, Saturday, I'm taking my daughter to church camp. It was a Christian camp for the summer for a week in the middle of nowhere in Michigan. I mean, literally nowhere. They got this camp. I'm walking down the trail, and who comes walking at me? The same lady. She had just dropped her kid off, and she's looking at me like, "I know you from somewhere." And we had one of the most greatest conversations about that track.
Wow.
Even though she's saved, it was very encouraging. It was just cool.
Yeah.
That, sometimes God gives you those pick-me-ups.
Yep.
But I mean, I've been doing it for 20 years. There's, I could talk forever on that. There's just so many of them. A real funny one. I have done a lot of witnessing at Michigan State University. It's about 25 minutes from where I'm at. And that's really where we cut our teeth, which is a funny thing. Story on that is when we first heard Hell's Best Kept Secret, we thought, we got to go where there's people. Well, there's people at MSU. And so after about 30 minutes there, we realized we're pretty stupid compared to these kids on campus. Let's go back, start reading the Bible a little bit better, and study a little bit more before we go in there, because they're asking us questions. And I have no idea what they're talking about. And so that's how I got into studying theology and stuff, and found out, I need a deeper understanding of the Word. and not just, a little bit off the back of a gospel tract. So continue to go back because that's where people's at. So I'm passing these tracts out. It's a Friday night. The kids are going in and out of bars and stuff like that. And this kid comes up and he snatches a tract out of my hand, which I thoroughly hate. I hate the whole snatching thing. I usually tell him, because I'm older now, hey, that's not how you treat your elders, But so he snatches it out of my hand, and he rips it in two, lights it on fire, and throws it in my chest. And he goes, "What do you think about that?" I go, "I think I got the most awesome illustration that I'm probably going to tell till the day I die." And here I am telling it on a podcast. And the guy just looked at me and he's like, "What? You're not mad? Why would I be mad?" And then I just witnessed to him one-to-one, and nothing happened. He walked off, but he heard it. I still talking about it.
Yeah.
And you don't know that nothing happened. I mean, you don't know what happened.
I mean, nothing happened
night.
At that minute. Yeah.
Yeah.
But hopefully he never forgot about it, because I haven't. And when I tell that story, I think about him, and I'll probably pray for him again today.
Amen. Yeah.
Yeah. But what's cool is with some of your stories, I think what they prove is that, there's a hit and run nature to tracks, and a lot of times we don't know what happens to the person after they get it, but we know that God's word never returns void, and as long as the tract includes God's word, which yours do, and the ones that I look for certainly do, it's going to accomplish what it's supposed to accomplish. And so you don't know when those people walk off. You have to trust that God's going to give the growth. So even the guy who throws it in your chest and lights it on fire, you don't know where it went from there. He could be a saved individual. He could be telling that story too. Like, can you imagine? I did that 10 years ago, and now here I am today. We don't know. We won't know until we get to the end, really, right? But there's all these great moments, like when you run into that woman again. It's like, look at the impact that it had, and it wasn't even a track that she liked. She was mad at you for it.
Yeah.
And then here she is bumping into you again, and you have this great conversation with her. Do you my question for you? I know your website allows for submissions, and I'm sure there's going to be some people probably listening to this podcast who are thinking, I've had some great ideas for tracks. I'm curious to know what your advice is for people who want to compose their own tracks. I'll tell you, the first time I had a tract idea was probably about 3 or 4 years ago, and I sat down and I wrote it with such eagerness, and it was like 6 pages long, and like I as I'm writing it, I'm like, oh, this is like divinely inspired. This is amazing stuff. This is going to change the world. And then I get to the end and I'm like, now let me go back and read it. And I'm like about, I don't know, 20 seconds into reading it, I'm like, whoa, this is way too much information. So eventually, and I think you said this earlier, I can't remember if it was on camera or when we chatted before, but a shorter tract actually has more impact. I know somebody once gave me the advice that when you send an email, like for work purposes, you want it to fit in the preview pane of the. That's only for people who are familiar with sitting in front of Outlook all day long. But you want it to be short so that people will actually read it. So besides that, assuming you agree with it, what other advice do you have for people who want to write tracks?
Well, on your analogy with the email, there was a study that was just done that if you have an email or a paragraph or anything that's over 8 sentences long, nobody reads it. They don't even read the first 8 sentences. They just see it's long and they're like, "Yeah, I'm not doing that."
Delete.
Delete or pick up the phone and call instead. I'm good for that. If somebody emails me something long, I'm like, "Yeah, I'm ringing them."
Cut to the chase. Yep.
Just tell me what you want. Summarize it.
Yeah.
But for writing gospel tracts, with that, we know that people now, don't read like that. They don't want to invest that much time into it. First off, you got to remember, who are you writing the tract to? Like you said, you wrote 6 pages. Who did you write that to? It was probably full, and I'm not picking on you, but
that's
you probably
okay.
wrote that to yourself.
Yeah,
you wrote it to another Christian. You didn't write it to an unbeliever. They're not going to understand it. They're probably going to understand 98% of what you put on there. And that's why short and sweet, and then you break it down on a website or in a conversation later.
Yeah.
So if somebody's out there wants to write a tract, definitely write the 6-page thing, read it, and then ask yourself who's it wrote to. Can they even understand it?
Mm-hmm.
Go back to the Old Testament, look at what Jesus said to people, and he didn't preach these when he preached the longer messages, who was he preaching it to?
Yeah.
To the rabbis, to the Jewish people, not to the Samaritans, not to the heathen, not to the Gentiles.
Yeah.
He had short conversations with them and called them to repent. And that's just what we need to do. But so, number one, think about who your target audience is. It's got to have the law, and then it's got to have the gospel. And you can fit those in with not a whole lot of room. Yeah. And if you do have something that, like we do the stuff for Alpha and Omega, Dr. James White, we print some of his tracts and stuff like that. And they're pretty long, but they're really good tracts. But they're for a specific audience.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, they can be longer, but you gotta know who you're giving them to.
Right. Yeah. For the average, when you're going out and handing out tracts, whether it's 100 at a time or 1 million at a time, that's a quick, quick exchange. People are taking them and moving on. That might be the only opportunity you have to get the gospel into someone's hands. So make sure it includes the gospel. Make sure it's the actual gospel message.
And I'm sure somebody that's listening to this right now is saying, yeah, no, we got to give them a Bible. We got to give them a long message. Think about this. When you're driving down the road and you see a billboard that says McDonald's next exit, did you just get hungry? Oh yeah, I could do it. I could use a drink, or I could use a burger.
Yeah.
That was a short message, right? They didn't have to convince you and try and lure you in with this long message to get you to go to McDonald's on a billboard. So short messages work. And then when you go in there, you see the menu, and it's all broke out. There's a bigger message, and then you can read the nutrition and decide that no, you can't eat there anyways because it's not healthy. But short messages, they just work, and it piques their interest. And if they don't go to your website, maybe they'll go to a church, and Sunday morning they get the rest of the gospel message, or they get a deeper understanding of it.
Yep.
But you can bore somebody to death, and after you've been on the streets, you guys know it. You probably talk to somebody, and you're 30 seconds into a conversation, and their eyes are rolled back. They're not listening. Slap a track in their hand and move on. But then there's other times, 3 hours later, I'm still talking to somebody.
Yeah. No, that's really good.
But if somebody wants to write a track, there's some advice. But yeah, we take submissions all the time. What I tell people is we just don't take submissions. We'll print it for you. We'll help you do it. If you're not confident you think you can write it, but you have an idea, shoot it over to me. I'll take a look at it. And just don't get your feelings hurt, if we critique it some. We're not mean, but we also don't want to put out something that's not right, and something I think is, looks like it was done in the early 70s.
Yeah.
We want to make it, classy, modern, and something like that somebody would want to take. And they're cheap. I mean, we sell these for $4.95 for a pack of 100. It's almost a nickel a piece. They used to be cheaper, but shipping is getting us. But
Yep.
But where can you reach 100 people for $5, right?
Yeah.
And if $5 ain't worth 100 people, then you don't need the pack of tracts.
Yeah.
And but we do these things I love. I do these for a bunch of churches. It's a church business card with a gospel message on the back with an invitation. So if you got a church, at the end of it, it says, if you have any questions, we would be honored to help you find the answer, and it's an invite. Anybody, people at churches, they might not be on board with evangelism, but boy, are they on board inviting people to church, right? Which is a form of evangelism. And you put this in their hand, they're passing a tract out, and they don't even know it. So that's bait and switch. But yeah, if somebody wants to do a tract, contact us. We'll help you out. We print. I was trying to. Somebody asked me not that long ago how many we've done, and we're close to 100 million tracts that we printed. If not,
think about how many seeds have been planted. That's amazing. Yeah.
And it's I love doing bulk orders. And if somebody's on here listening and they, you're down and out and broke, contact us. We supply tracts for a tract ministry called the Zugan. I don't know if you ever heard of it. They mail
sure.
out, Carl mails out, I think it's 20 or 30 tracts each month to members for free.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all our tracts. His ideas, our ideas, and we partnered in with that. Because one of the things I've wanted to do ever since when I started this is I believe people will do more if they could afford more. Because like I said in the beginning, I couldn't afford to pass out 1 million tracts. And it was just too expensive. So we tried to keep our prices as low as we possibly can. And we've done that by cutting out middlemen and different things like that. And like I said, $5 for 100. It's a cup of coffee. It's less than a cup of coffee.
Yep, but you can reach 100 people for the same. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And if you can't use the finances that the Lord has blessed you with to bless others with the gospel, what are we doing? What are we even doing here?
Yeah.
And we have an avenue, with this track, with Carl's track ministry, Bazoogan, that even if you really think you can't afford it, we can get 30 tracks to you, at no cost.
Nice.
But
so
you can buy 5,000 tracks for, I think it's $150, something like that. A big bulk order, all one style. We'll break it down and we'll print your church information on the back. There's tons of stuff we can do.
Cool. Well, the websites again are 1milliontracts.com and you got our tract.com. The first one is for those who are looking to order tracts from Marv's secret stash.
And it's all spelled out ONE, 1 million tracts.
Yep. And you got our tract.com. Check that out too. That's the message that people are sent to when they receive the tracts that Marv prints and sells through 1 million tracts. For me, and I think for John as well, we're tract nerds anyway. We could talk tracts for like 6 or 7 hours. And I think you're right there too. So for us, this is like real like inside shop talk here. But I mean, this was like fascinating stuff for those people who are listening, who are interested in evangelizing, interested in reaching the lost. Maybe you feel that tug on your heart, like this is biblical. I'm supposed to be sharing the gospel, but you're not sure about tracts. You've never handed them out before. You have this idea that there might be something weird about it. It's not. I encourage you, head over to 1milliontracts.com. Grab a couple of packages of some that look eye-catching to you. Give it a shot. And see how productive it feels once you actually hit the streets and hand these out. And the side note is, we don't do this because it's fun. We do it because we want to serve the Lord and because we care about the lost. But my goodness, it is also fun. It's a good time just hitting the streets and handing out tracts and witnessing to people. It's a great time. Like, what better way to spend your time, But I encourage you, if you're listening today and you've never ordered a tract and you've never handed one out in your life, give it a shot and see how you feel about it. Because I guarantee you'll walk away with a real positive impression of the tract life. So with that said, Marv,
and parents, let me just add one other thing, right?
Go ahead.
If you've not done it before, this can be a family thing, right? It's great to go out and have your kids with you. They love to give out tracts as well.
Yep.
One fun thing we did, and I know you're closing, but for people that are a little afraid, we had a big group of people that were kind of apprehensive with tracts. So I just had this really dumb idea. We all divided up in like 10 cars. we hit every gas station in town, and at the same time, we put a track in all the pumps and then got out of Dodge. And then we did that like 2 or 3 times that day. And they thought it was so much fun, and there was no thing of fear. All they had to do was put it in the slot and take off. And they realized it's really disarming,
Yeah.
And think about this, if you're the person out there that's afraid, were you mad at the person that shared the gospel with you? Are you still mad at that person today? No.
That's a good point.
Don't think they're going to be mad at you.
And by the way, John is right. It's a family affair, and I'm going to close with this story actually. So I was actually, when we were off camera before we started, I was showing this tract right here, which Marv actually printed. Somebody had sent me about 2,500 of these $1 million tracts with Trump on them. That's not Trump's signature; it's somebody else on there. And my family and I decided there was a Trump rally in Pennsylvania, and we decided what better place to hand out, a couple thousand of these I call them Trump bucks. What better place to hand them out than at a place where everyone's there wearing Trump t-shirts and Trump hats. So we went there, and my wife and my 2 sons, who at the time would have been 9 and 12. This was last fall. We went and we just kind of worked the parking lot. And it's funny because we all went our separate ways. I was at one point, I'm looking for where are my kids? Where's my wife? Where are they? And I find my oldest son. At the time, he was 12 years old. And he's working 2 tour buses by himself. There's got to be 100 people on each of these buses. And they're like pouring off these buses. And he's just going up there going, did you get one? Did you get one? Did you get one? Handling 2 buses by himself. I got my 9-year-old off to the side. He's getting all the people getting out of their cars. The kids get into this stuff. By the way, kids don't have inhibition. They don't have filters. At least mine do.
Right.
That's why they're getting in trouble so often. So, but they don't have the inhibition that we have as adults. So what a great time to take them out and teach them how to go serve the Lord. Teach them young. What better thing can you teach your kids than to go out and serve God? That's my 2 cents anyway. Yeah. All right. Well, Marv, thanks again. We really appreciate this. Folks, if you're listening, check out 1milliontracts.com and yougotOurtract.com. Go order some tracts. John, it's been fun. Marv, it's been a great time.
Absolutely.
Thank you all. Thank you all for listening. Our 3 things we always ask you as we head out of here. Please subscribe to our channel, share this video, and finally, and most importantly, go share the gospel with someone today. Thanks, folks. We'll see you next time on Bibles and Bullhorns.